Hello and welcome to this YouTube channel, YouTube video. This is kind of a different video than I normally do, but I wanted to at least have this conversation as it was a conversation that was spurred on the podcast this week for Gaming Insight. If you haven't checked that out, make sure to go listen to the Gaming Insight podcast. I did an episode with Danny Pena about the layoffs and the future of the gaming industry and future of AAAs. It's a great episode. Definitely recommend checking it out. But today, or this video, I want to talk about more specifically the same topic in regards to layoffs, but more specifically in regards to those who are disabled who have been laid off. And I have here my good friend, Grant Stoner. Hi, Grant. How you doing?
Hi. How are you? I'm good.
I'm
Thanks
good.
for having me.
No problem. You wrote an amazing article that I know you've been working on for quite a while. It's on IGN. I'll link to it in the description down below. But it's titled "How Mass Layoffs Devastated Disabled Game Developers." And you went through and you talked to quite a few folks who were affected by the layoffs, whether it was last year or even like just basically within the past year or so. Of all these companies that have been laying off. We all have heard the many stories about it. We're close to 8,000 people laid off just in 2024 alone in the gaming industry.
8,000.
Yeah, and we had over 10,000 last year. And I kind of made a joke of it in sort of a degree in the podcast. I said that we're in the layoff speed run any percent, which is. It sucks to hear like so many people being laid off and competing all for the same jobs that also are very limited in of itself. But what's not being talked about is definitely the disabled aspect or the disabled game developers aspect. So Grant, why don't you tell us a little bit, basically what was the main aspect of the article?
Yeah. So in the USA alone, according to like the CDC and other government surveys, roughly 20% of the population has some form of a disability. And in America, your healthcare is inexplicably tied to your employment. While there are alternatives like Medicare and Medicaid, you have to meet specific requirements to even qualify for those.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you're on them, there's no guarantee that they will cover everything you need. So again, the main issue is if you want good coverage for your needs, you need to have a job that provides you with benefits. So I spoke with approximately 5 individuals. Only 3 are in this story. But I spoke with 5 people, all about how they were laid off during the sweeping layoffs we've had since last year and this year,
Mm-hmm.
and the impact it's had on them as disabled individuals who can no longer access their benefits
Mm-hmm.
to either pay for medications, get procedures, even have routine treatments done. A lot of disabled people who I spoke with had to completely forego medications because they weren't covered by Medicare or Medicaid, or if they weren't eligible for Medicare or Medicaid, they couldn't afford the medications.
Right.
I spoke with people who simply had to cancel surgeries
Mm-hmm.
or procedures because they couldn't afford it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of a trigger warning, but several of the people I spoke to were suicidal because they couldn't afford the care they need for their disabilities. Of which some of the disabilities were causing them immense pain, like
Right.
physical pain. So several of them felt that the only way out was suicide. it's very, it demonstrates the sheer bullshitness
Yeah.
of the U.S. healthcare system, where without a job, if as a disabled person, you're essentially screwed. Um, and when we speak about the layoffs, they're awful for everyone involved.
Yes.
But there's a layer of awfulness and fear that only disabled employees experience. And this story was demonstrating just what happens to them after these layoffs.
Yeah, because it was interesting that with the people that you talk to, at least from what I was reading in the article, was there were some folks that had to kind of decide on what kind of medication they could afford or what they could take. And hey, I'm blessed that at least that I'm in Canada, and part of our medication is covered under the healthcare that we have, but that doesn't mean that all healthcare is covered. There, especially when it comes to even those with disabilities, and even those with disabilities here in Canada, while we have a pretty, without getting into the politics of things, a socialist society, that essentially still disabled people are sometimes kind of left out, and especially when having to be able to get coverage within insurance for medication that may not be seen as sort of needed medically, or like it's not life threatening essentially, or it can be seen like with the insurance companies. But you had in there that there was definitely some folks that essentially were having to now decide whether or not to be able to, now, like, they've had so little time to be able to adjust to the layoffs, but now they also have like 30, 60 to 90 days before their like benefits end, and they have to now find new medical care from different doctors and nurses. Was that something that you found?
Generous. The one person I interviewed, my first source was laid off on July 13th, I believe, or July 11th. I can't remember the exact date. On July 31st, his benefits ran out. So he was given 2 weeks to scramble to refill all of his prescriptions, get any major appointments in. His wife also relied on medications that they then had to be like, how are we going to afford these? Some people, when they were laid off, their benefits lasted maybe a month. Some people were a few weeks. Some people were given, I think the one person I spoke with was laid off in January of this year. And their employment termination date is in March. I don't know when their benefits run out. I don't remember.
Right.
So it just depends on the company on what the severance package is. But yeah, it's especially when you're disabled, a month just isn't enough time to schedule appointments and get prescriptions, especially if you were saving up for like potential surgeries or procedures.
Yeah.
Especially with experimental medications.
Yep.
Most insurances won't cover those anyway. But I'm technically, it's not experimental, but I'm on what's called an orphan drug. Those are drugs that only a small percentage of the population will benefit from. It costs roughly $300,000 a year.
Oh my God.
Most insurances will not cover that. So if I did not have insurance, I wouldn't be able to take the medication.
Right.
So for other people who are on life-saving medications, they are essentially in a timed situation to find a job. Because also when you apply for like Medicare, Medicaid, it takes several weeks to several months to be
Right.
approved. The one person, my source I spoke to, was laid off in July, right?
Mm-hmm.
He just got approved for Medi-Cal, which is California's version of Medicare,
Mm-hmm.
last month.
Oh, 6
So,
months. My
yeah.
God.
So he had to sacrifice taking 2 medications for roughly 4 months.
Wow.
So he had to just stop 2 medications.
And that's just it's horrible to even think about. And I even think about today, there was a story of Rockstar trying to be able to enforce a back to work 5 days a week law or rule because of they're working on GTA 6 and they don't want any leaks, and it's better for the employees, but that doesn't account for like those who are disabled who need to work from home, who have benefited
Right.
from working from home.
And there are some situations where if they need remote work,
Mm-hmm.
which often disabled people do, the employer will probably offer them as a severance package. But well, if you can't return to office, then you have to leave.
Which is a horrible choice to have to make, because okay, well, you can keep your job, or you can work from home forever, or come into the office and potentially make your disability even worse. But then there's even people that don't even live near the studio or live near a physical building that the studio kind of owns. So now they have to figure out a way to either move to that area or find a way to transport to that area. And for those who may not know, for those with disabilities, getting to and from places is not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
It's either you have to have vehicles or family members that are able to accommodate the sort of like potential like specific wheelchairs that people may have, or they are not able to drive themselves, period. So they have to rely on Ubers or public transit like myself. And it's not the easiest thing to be able to get around. And also, adding in the extra time that it's going to take to get to an office, that's also can exasperate any disability, and also just not improve your quality of life if you're having to spend 3+ hours or whatever on transit just to be able to get to work every day.
Well, there's also the layer of many disabled people who use state services can benefit from remote work because they don't have to live in the state.
Right.
And if you're implementing return to office, they have to leave their jobs because of the state services they use.
Yeah.
Like me, for example, I have state insurance for Pennsylvania. I need remote work, just period. I need it. Because state insurance pays for my nursing. And I need nursing, obviously, because my parents are my primary caregivers, and they're getting older, so that's not good for them.
It's not sustainable to have them to keep doing it for sure.
No. So a lot of the situations is like, commuting sucks, working in the office sucks, especially for people who can't. But also, like, for many disabled people who need to live in their state, remote work is the only option they have. And in the industry where a lot of the work you do can be done on a computer, but you don't need to be in an office for this. It's basically like a gun to your head situation. Like, you either move or you leave your job. There's no alternative.
So with the people that you talk to, was there anything that you saw that, or anything that you kind of can postulate as a potential, anything that could be able to see, like looking into the future, that like is is this going to get worse, or is this going to like get better as more people talk about it? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's important to raise awareness because, as far as I'm concerned, and this isn't like bragging because I hate sounding like that, I haven't seen a report talk about disabled experiences in these situations. So then it's really important to highlight this narrative. But I mean, we're already in February, we're March. Tomorrow's March, right?
Yeah.
And we're already over 8,000 jobs lost. So it's going to get worse. And that's a guarantee. But I highly doubt the industry is just going to stop laying people off March 1st.
Right.
So we're probably going to go above last year's numbers, which was over 10,000. The only way to change it is like all the C-suites and the executives who have like $1 million salaries, right? If you have 5 employees, who have a salary of like, $100,000, but your CEO is making $25 million.
Sure.
Just slash the CEO's salary.
Yeah.
It's a very easy solution, but no one's doing it.
Right.
I mean, we saw with Activision Blizzard, Bobby Kotick received like a $350 million payout for something like that. There's no reason for it. There's just no reason for that. There just isn't. There's no reason for it.
Yeah.
And you could have saved dozens of jobs if you didn't just give him a paycheck for leaving.
Yeah. And it sucks too, because like oftentimes, at least when the gaming and in the gaming industry, when you're working for a studio, sometimes I mean, at least our friends who work in the accessibility side, they're kind of sometimes seen as sort of support, or they don't necessarily have the same sort of standing as like a lead on teams. They're kind of more of a either internal champions, or just, they're just part of a team that, that they're part of accessibility, and that's accessibility is just part of their job. And oftentimes those jobs essentially are also under risk. And we haven't seen a lot of, accessibility specific positions being let go. But it's not to say that it hasn't happened, and also it doesn't say that it won't happen. Like, it won't happen ever. And it's now even more worse when you consider that, just a disabled developer on the team being let go and having to rely on a life-saving, or just quality of life medication. And it just, I don't know, I don't know what the solution is, and other than having to be able to change the system. And right now, I think you kind of said it. Like, right now, we kind of need a little bit more awareness on it. And so that's why I'm like, hey, I'm thankful for you to be able to researching this article, because I know that like, just a little bit behind the scenes, I know that was a very hard report to report on.
It was. I'm very glad I did it because it needed to happen. I'm very thankful for everyone who came forward.
Right.
Because I know it wasn't easy for them. But this is my first, like, stepping my toes into trauma reporting.
Right.
And it's very, because most of the stories I sort of like shifted the way I look at my work now because of the story. Most of the stories I write, like, you interview developers, here's what they did to make their games accessible, right? You interview disabled players, here's how they're playing these games. Those stories are nice, and they are important, but when your own developers who are disabled can't afford to live because of these layoffs, it really puts things in perspective. Like, a lot of the accessibility work that we highlight, there's such a deeper level underneath it of it's a lot more traumatic than just the newest game came out with 75 options.
Yeah.
It's great,
Sure.
but at what cost?
Exactly. Yeah. And as we're starting to see that AAA is kind of being changed quite a bit, and resources are not going to be as plentiful as it was in the past. We might even see less of that in the future, and so.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like I know this video is kind of like a doom and gloom sort of scenario, but I think you're right. We do have to talk about it and make people aware that this is happening, and it's happening behind closed doors, and people don't necessarily know. Like now we're seeing the bigger human impact of this, and this is just, it adds to that, and I think it just adds to the voices of, hey, this something needs to change, and something needs to change fast. Otherwise, we're going to lose. Not only just people with who want to be able to make games, but also just disabled creators who want to be able to get in this space and create games.
Gonna lose people.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have access to medication,
people are going to die from this.
Yeah,
that's a very sad, awful thing to say, but that's the reality of it. That people will, God forbid, but people will probably pass from this.
Yeah.
Because it's just a reality. And it makes me really question when we see all these companies release statements when everyone plays, we all win. That statement is just hollow at the end of the day. It really, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything, because not even the people who make these games can play or win.
Yeah.
Because they have to sacrifice medications, procedures, treatments.
Yeah.
Because you laid them off.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I think kind of the takeaway from this video is go read Grant's article, Grant's report. It's a devastating read, but it's something that is so well reported. So thank you, Grant, for writing that and researching that. Thanks to Rebecca Valentine for helping you out with that as well.
Rebecca's amazing. Everyone read her work.
Yes.
She writes some of the best reports this industry has.
Exactly. I think even better than other investigative reporters in the space. So go read the article and then go and then go share the article, please. Even if you want to share this video as well, just to kind of at least get some awareness out there. Because I mean, and we at the end of the day, we're also advocates too for accessibility, and this is a part of advocating for accessibility in the gaming space. And if we want to be able to make more games or play more games that are accessible, we also need to be able to make a way for disabled developers to be able to help make those games accessible too. So please go share the article. The link is in the description down below. And make sure to also check out Grant on socials. I'll link to him below. And thank you, Grant, for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.